And while he's doing that, welcome to Wednesday to Tuesday, the podcast for QSR operators who don't just show up on the weekends, they run the whole damn week. I'm Hunter Charneski.
I'm David Taylor.
I started as a late shift sandwich artist at one of his stores, and in another 2 years, I was overseeing 16 stores as a senior district manager. Now I'm with Taco Bell and bringing everything I've learned about leadership, culture, and turning chaos into performance. As he said, he's David Taylor. He's got 37 years of experience in QSR and hospitality, including decades with the Subway brand. He's led through trends, turnarounds, and tough markets, and he's still obsessed with getting the basics right. Together, we're bringing you real stories, blunt numbers, and field-proven leadership that actually works on the floor, not just in a spreadsheet. If you're serious about building teams, running lean, and leading from the front, well, then you're in the right place. And hey, if you want to lead yourself with the same precision you use in store, grab my book, The Way Out of Self-Sabotage into Self-Mastery. It's available on Amazon and huntercharneski.com. Be sure to like, share, and subscribe, and send this to someone who runs their business like it matters, because it does. And one thing that we're talking about today is some businesses that are kind of not sure if it's still going to matter and could be just after one bad quarter. David sent me a YouTube video earlier this week about, 13 stores, brands that were they're on the fringe, not sure if they're going to make it to see 2026. And so we thought that'd be a great podcast topic. And I guess what we're talking about today is how to not be a meh brand. So David, how do some of these brands, things, I'm trying to think, Chuck E. Cheese, Subway was on the list.
Subway was on the
Pizza
list.
Hut.
Pizza Hut was on
Ruby
the list.
Tuesday, IHOP. They're kind of meh. If operators are listening to this show, how do they not be a meh brand?
Well, I think first and foremost is you need to focus, like Subway. You need to focus on what you do the best. So Subway, it's all about sandwiches. Taco Bell, which isn't on the list, that's doing great. It's all about, Tex-Mex. But Ruby Tuesdays, some of the others, they just they had such a scattered menu. It was like, what are they? Who are they? What are they? I think that Subway, Subway, when we first got into it, first of all, it was, we'd never heard of Subway in West Michigan. And it's like, what is, you're going to have a restaurant selling sandwiches, but then we got this really good peak, and we were the go-to brand for Subway sandwiches, to the point that I had a friend who said to me, when we were little and our parents said, where do you want to go to eat? It was McDonald's. I said, now I ask my kids, where do you want to go to eat? It's Subway.
That's when your kids were teenagers?
Yeah, exactly.
Which was what year?
Middle 90s, late 90s.
So
late 90s.
So it's been about 30 years since Subway's been...
Yeah, I mean, they held that for a long time.
Yeah.
And I would say over the last maybe 5 years, is it the go-to place for a sandwich? Is it not just a sandwich, but is it the go-to place for any QSR dining out? And how do you get back to that? Individual restaurants, individual franchisees can get back to it, like we discussed in last week's pod about this is my Subway, and that's where we're going. But how does the brand get back to that? And I think, there are a lot of people out there smarter than me trying to figure it out. I guess my opinion on it is focus on what you do best. Be the best sandwich shop you can be.
Yeah.
Be the best burger shop you can be. Be the best at what you are.
I think it's Orville Redenbacher's popcorn.
Right.
Their mission statement is do one thing and do it better than anybody else.
Exactly.
Anybody who hears the name, it's so obscure, it's clunky, but you know what they do because that's what they've staked their claim on for their entirety of their being. Everybody knows Orville Redenbacher does popcorn.
Right.
They don't do cheese. They do popcorn. and I think part of the reason why is going back to what you said. They're not focusing on the thing that they do the best, or they should do the best, and so they have all these shiny objects. Now they're losing sight on what made them the best in the first place. IHOP was pushing burgers at one point.
Yeah.
You're the International House of Pancakes.
IHOB, is that what they're?
Yeah.
Yeah. And yeah, be the best that you can be.
Yeah.
Chick-fil-A is chicken, 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 chicken.
Mm-hmm. Yes.
And they're dominating the market.
Yep. Yep.
You know? Wingstop.
Yep.
Chicken wing, chicken wing, chicken wings. They're dominating the market, right?
Mm-hmm.
Dunkin', donuts, donuts, donuts.
So, how do you get back to? How do you get away from the meh? How do you get back to it? I think, and it's something that I talk about in my book, is you got to do the same things differently.
Mm-hmm.
You got to do the same things differently. And I'm going to sound a little bit Dunning-Kruger here when I say this, because I've only been with the brand for a few weeks now. But when you walk into a renovated Taco Bell, it's very analogous to Chipotle or Qdoba's aesthetic when you walk in. The rustic industrial feel.
Mm-hmm.
It's no longer fast food when you walk in there. It's food served fast. That's almost they're trying to bring the fast casual full service feel to QSR.
Right.
And I think that's one way that you can do it, especially just aesthetically for the guests, but then also just it's just like anything else. It's just like if you're writing a book, it's just like if you're training, you've got to just cut away. Bruce Lee, be a Bruce Lee it. Discard what is useless, keep what is useful, add what is uniquely your own.
Yep.
Right?
Oh yeah, that's great.
So
I like that.
Yeah. Oh yeah. Yeah. I mean, it's
like
absolutely, and I'm going to continue to draw on writing and training principles to it, because it's too analogous to not notice it right then and there. So, but I think the other thing that you can do if a brand is struggling and they're teetering towards meh, or they're knee deep in meh, is is it just aesthetically, David? How is it just aesthetically bringing the fast casual full service feel to QSR? I think that's part of it, because take an example. Last night when I was working, there was a family of 8 that came in, and their ticket was $77 for everything that they ate on our menu. Now, for them, that was probably eating out. That was like going out to eat that night.
Family of 8, $77.
$77 at 10:30 at night.
That's $9+ per person.
Yeah. Whereas if they would have gone to an actual full service restaurant, that could have been triple, double at least.
Oh yeah.
So how do you? So I think that's part of it. Is how do you? So if you were one of those brands, how do you? Because it can't. I'm assuming it's not overnight.
It's not overnight.
How do you start integrating the full service feel into QSR?
Aesthetics are important, but it's really hard as a brand to dictate to a franchisee, hey, you need to spend $50,000, $75,000 to bring your restaurant, to improve the aesthetics, and show them what the ROI is and how long the ROI is going to be. I think that a brand as a whole, if they are sliding into meh or are in meh, they also need to invest some money in the aesthetics in terms of, we will partner with you, Mr. Franchise, Miss Franchisee, and we will, we'll reduce the cost to remodel the restaurant, or we will foot X amount, or we'll give you a grant to help you bring the aesthetics up. That's important. Aesthetics are important. And I think that, if I have a choice, or you have a choice of eating in a, newly refreshed Taco Bell or an old Taco Bell, service is the same, you're going to go to the newly refreshed one. Yeah. Same way with Subway, same way with McDonald's, Wendy's, whoever, I think there are some brands that are in the meh, that are that aren't going to suffer because of it because they're large and they have the cash. But the brands that are in the meh that don't have the cash, it's hard. It's hard to get out of there once you get in there.
You know what I think you could do? We talked a little bit about last time. It would take you'd have to have one hell of a leader, and you'd have to have one hell of a public speaker almost in every single store, because I had the conversation last night with what you talked about last time we did this. There was a young kid there. He was kind of dragging a little bit, not sure what to do. And I just said, "Hey, so-and-so, what's going on?" And I was cleaning behind him, and he said, "Oh, it's pretty much the way the life's been going these days." And I said, "All right, well, what's going on?" Like, "Well, our house isn't selling, so we're probably gonna have to move twice this summer." I'm like, "Oh yeah, been there. It's a pain in the ass." And he's like, I was trying to figure out what I'm good at, and not sure if I can find that here. Need to get a real job." And so I said to him, "Well, is this money that you make here real?" "Well, yeah." "Well, then I guess this would be a real job, wouldn't it?" "Yeah." "And well, what are you good at?" "Statistics." I'm like, statistics are actually pretty important in this industry.
Oh yeah.
What if I told you that I started just where you were in September 23, then I was moving up, and in less than 2 years overseeing 16 stores, and brother, I was making good money. If you're searching for money, you might be exactly where you need to be.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
So having those conversations multiplicatively in each store, in each area or district, in each region, I think that could transform getting out of the meh.
Right.
Because it goes back to what we talked about as far as the people go. Because if the people know what they want and they're clarified, they have a mission, I think that could get you out of the meh.
I guess I would.
But how do you do that tactically?
Yeah, I would equate.
Right?
Yeah, I would equate that to like brand ambassadors in a way. I love Subway. I love the brand. Have loved the brand for 30 some years. To see it sliding hurts me. I am a Subway brand ambassador.
You're Subway Dave.
I'm Subway Dave. Have been forever.
Mm-hmm.
So there needs to be more brand ambassadors, develop brand ambassadors. If if you're in leadership in a QSR franchise, and by that I mean on the corporate side, develop brand ambassadors.
That's really interesting you say, because that is the first archetype that Jim Sullivan outlines in multi-unit leadership. In the 7 stages of it is ambassadors.
Really?
Is ambassadors.
I haven't read that one yet. No, I think that's really important. It's like, I think it's easier today to develop that than it was when we first started with all the social media. It's so much easier to have brand ambassadors. When I was back in the day when I was a influencer, we didn't have any of the social media. It was word of mouth, me going to places, talking to people anywhere I went, bringing a sandwich with me.
Yeah.
Here's a free 6-inch. Go try my store. So I think brand ambassadorship is highly important to get out of the meh.
So tactically speaking, so we know that. So that's the strategy,
right?
Brand ambassador, a strategy. Now, getting more granular with it, David, then how would that look tactically for a brand that's in the meh?
I think every store needs to identify someone who's a brand ambassador and give them that title. Make them, using Subway's terminology, you are a sandwich artist / brand ambassador. This is your job description. You're going to be in charge of social media for this store. I think that sometimes...
What's their number?
What do you mean their number?
Their KPI or their OBN, objective by number. Because how do you track whether they're doing a good job as a brand ambassador?
So I think some things are highly trackable, some things aren't. Do we attach a number to it? Do we say how many, create a social media page for this store? And I know there are some brands that they want to bring all of that back to the brand and control the message, which I think has its downfalls.
What kind of BS do you have to work through as a franchisee, though, with some of that things? Because I remember I tried to do that when I was the manager at Jennison.
Right.
I tried to put up a private Facebook group for just the Jennison store, and Subway's like, eh.
So that's where I'm getting to.
Yeah.
Stop it.
Corporate,
if you're corporate, stop it.
Yeah.
Your best brand ambassadors are the people in the store, your manager, your great, crew chief, whatever. They're your best brand ambassador. So stop trying to control them.
Mm-hmm.
Maybe give them a one-page guideline.
Mm-hmm.
Have every store make that mandatory. Have every store start a social media page, whether it be Instagram or Facebook or any of them, X.
Yeah.
Any of them. Have them start it. And then give them the guidelines. Say, these are the guidelines that you need to follow.
Yeah.
You can't post negative stuff. You can't do this. But do this, do this, do this. Give them a lot of the positives to do. Put up pictures of you guys marching in the, what did we just have? Memorial Day parade.
Yeah.
Put up pictures of you delivering catering to the high school basketball team on your website. Let every single one of your stores and every single one of your franchisees be a brand ambassador. Don't try to control.
Don't be too corporate.
Yeah.
The corporate doesn't sell. It's because, you know why? Because it's not authentic.
No.
That's why legacy media is dying, because everybody likes to talk like this, and that's not how people actually talk.
No, it's yeah. I mean, we just you just sit around like we are and talk.
Right.
Hopefully this has a bigger impact of just us talking than preaching.
I mean, there's so many pictures I have on my phone still from when I was a manager at one of your stores. We had a sandwich artist who his thing was cosplay. And so he showed up one day after school. He wasn't working, but he just showed up he had created an entire character called August. And it was a big orange cat. He walked in as a big orange cat with a 3-piece suit on. Like, moments like that.
Yeah.
Like, right?
Oh, yeah. It puts you into the local community.
Yeah.
Instead of this whitewashed, boring corporate feel.
Yeah. Yeah. Success leaves clues. Success leaves clues. I mean, look at regardless of how you feel about him, you can't knock his reach. And that's Joe Rogan. How authentic is that guy? He's just doing as we are.
Right.
Talking to people, asking. He asks really, and one thing that he does well, better than anybody else, which I think is why his reach is so far and wide, and why he's so knowledgeable. He is not afraid to ask a stupid question.
Oh, right.
Right. And so if you can capture some of those moments, because the fact of the matter is, if you're in meh, or if you feel that your stores or the brand itself is teetering toward meh, maybe we aren't asking enough stupid questions.
Right.
Like the interaction I just told you about before we turn the thing on, about how we're keeping my workstation clean, spotless.
Oh yeah.
Like, why are we doing this? Why are we doing this? Why are we doing this?
Because we got to clean.
Because we have to clean. Because inspections coming in. No, my yes. You're like, yes, but the customers can see us. Right?
Right.
They can see us right now. This has to be spotless. If our line isn't clean, they're not going to trust what we're serving them. Right? Which again kind of teeters on the bringing the full service feel to the quick service. So, what else? Think about some of the other brands. I think some of the brands are cooked, honestly.
Oh, I do too, unless they're big and have money. I mean,
Chuck E. Cheese, yeah. I spent my 6th birthday there, like many birthdays there.
Right. I don't know how to bring that one back. Subway, I think, can come back quick, just by making every unit feel local instead of making it feel corporate. Make it feel local. And you do that with brand ambassadorship. You do that with recognizing everybody that walks in the door.
Yeah.
Developing that.
But and then if I'm cutting you off, I'm sorry.
Sure, no.
I think in part of it also, I'm I'm going to sound like a heel when I say this because I'm such a numbers guy, but being less focused on the numbers, does that work? Does that work? Is that practical?
No, you gotta keep your eye on both, but don't only keep your eye on the numbers. Numbers are important. I mean, no one goes into business not to make money.
Yeah. I told our last boss, I said, yeah, numbers don't lie, but they don't tell the whole story.
No. We buy businesses, we buy franchises to make money, and there's nothing wrong with it whatsoever. But it's more than that.
Yeah.
Especially for long-term franchisees. And I've talked to quite a few of them, some that have sold their stores already, some that are thinking about selling, some that will never sell. And, it is not just about the money for them, it's their life. It's their identity. Those are the type of people that you need to, as a franchise, develop, stroke, reward.
As a brand or a franchise?
As a brand.
As a brand,
you need to develop those franchisees that are not just, the money is important, bringing people into your organization that have the money to develop the stores is important, but it's not just that. It's, do they have a passion for your brand? Do they have a passion for QSR? Above and beyond, okay, you've got to have this much net worth. This is the startup cost in the store. Can you meet that? Yes, 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 yes. There needs to be a separate evaluation of an individual that's going to buy a franchise. That, do they have a passion for this franchise? Do they have a passion for donuts? Do they have a passion for subs? Do they have a passion for Tex-Mex? Above and beyond, do they meet all the financial qualifications?
So then how do you evaluate that? How do you wean out or winnow out the ones that don't? Because I think it's also, do you have a passion for people? Because we talked about that last time. You're talking to your paycheck.
Yep.
Right. If you can't treat them well, then your business is going to be ill.
And I don't care if you're going in to buy 100 stores. And if I'm a corporate franchise development person and someone comes to me and they have the wherewithal to buy 100 stores, I'm jumping at them. Yay, I can develop 100 stores. These guys got the money. They've got this, they've got that. But I also think that if they don't have that passion for QSR industry, passion for their people, passion for the brand itself, you sell them those 100 stores, a year, 2 years, you're going to start seeing a decline.
What would you say then?
But how to evaluate that individual, how to find that perfect franchisee.
Because my question is, I don't think that exists.
Yeah.
Or I think it's very rare. Because my question, David, is, I don't think somebody comes in. I think that's not true. I'm not going to be so dogmatic about that. I think it's less likely that you find individuals from out the gate are gung-ho and passionate about the brand and or the industry. However, if you find somebody with humility, they can develop a passion. Their passion can be developed. How do I know that? Because you're talking to one individual right now. I just needed a job a couple of years ago.
Right.
Now I love this industry.
Yeah.
So how do you, if it's, is passion the quality that we're looking to evaluate or vet with our franchisees, or are we looking for humility?
Humility. That's a good one. People skills. I mean, even if you have 200 stores and you're unable to visit every store and talk to every employee, which is understandable, and that's where you want to be, you still have to have people skills.
Yeah.
You still have to have a desire for your people. a desire for your customer. You know, we talked a lot about last week about the customer is our paycheck. But I think you can expand on that more. That
But we also talked about if the customer is first, the employee is more first.
exactly. But I think you can expand that. You know, don't look at every customer that walks in the door just as a dollar bill. They're that and more.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
You know, the customer that comes into your store once a week and spends, you know, $9-10, and they come in every week without fail, are far more valuable to you than that family of 8 that came in and spent, you know.
Yeah. I mean, that's what the list. I mean, just do the arithmetic on that. So they do $9, $10 a week. That's $520 a year. Yeah. That's $5,000 over 10 years. And that's that client lifetime value of that person. It's like,
but
so then now you got me going. So then now it's like, okay, well, we've identified a regular here whose client lifetime value is this. Okay, now what are we doing to find more of this person? Are we asking this person to bring some other people in, or are we like, hey, brother, here's a free coupon to give to somebody. Tell us to bring him in here, right? And then from there, because that's how we did it when I owned my gym. Right. So anybody that doesn't know this, I used to own a private training facility before giving it away. Blah 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 blah. It's in that book if you want the full story. But well, that's what we looked at, David. Was okay. We got Brianna here, right? And we know that our average client lifetime value is $1,800. I have no problem giving away a couple of hours of my time to find another Brianna because I know on average we're going to get $1,800
right
out of her. Right?
But you know what else? Goes back to what we're just talking about. You're turning that customer into a brand ambassador, right?
Yeah.
So not only are they worth the $520 a year, probably worth a lot more than that because they're a brand ambassador.
Yeah, yeah, because they'll do the marketing for you,
right?
Which is prerequisite. That is like prerequisite number one. If you're in food, or if you're definitely as a gym owner, that was like if you don't have word of mouth, you ain't then your product sucks,
right?
right. So, yeah, going back to the brand ambassador piece, going back to determining the client lifetime value. But I don't think people think that way. And I think that's why part of the reason we're doing this podcast.
Right.
They don't see Jack Mandrick, who comes in and he's 87 years old. He's been coming here, or Whitey. Yeah. At your place.
Yeah, we had one of the first customers we ever had in the store. And the whole time that I owned the franchisee, he got 10% off. He came in 3 times a week. And how many people he told that store was his Subway is immeasurable. So
now we're starting to have some tributaries forming off of a river.
Exactly.
From the brand ambassador piece. So now we're just not talking about our people in terms of the customer, but in terms of the employee, but we're also talking about identifying the brand ambassadors as the guests. Who are those individuals?
So
does that make sense?
Exactly. I mean, so you're identifying customers that can be brand ambassadors, like you said. You know, we talked a lot about how. Like you said, give them coupons. Hand these out. Those you can track. You can put a little code on the back, 1, 2, 3, and that stands for this customer. And this customer, over the course of a month, we got a 25% return on coupons brought back that had the number 1, 2, 3 on them.
Can you talk more about that?
So you give the customer let's say you identify a customer who can be a brand ambassador, or you identify an employee that can be a brand ambassador. You give them a bunch of coupons. You code those coupons, like, okay, employee Joe, I'm giving him coupons. I'm going to give him 100 coupons for free cookie. And, we're going to put the number 1 on every single one of those coupons. So I know I gave him 100 coupons with the number 1 on them. There were 50 of those coupons returned with the number 1 on them.
Yeah.
A 50% redemption rate is unheard of for coupons.
Yeah.
That's high. It's extremely high. So I know Joe, and people don't come in and just hand, in general, they don't come in and just hand in their coupon for a free cookie. Hey, I'm going to get a 6-inch, or I'm going to get a sandwich, I'm going to get a taco, whatever, and a drink.
Or if the employee is a kid,
yeah,
who gives the coupon to another kid because that's who they associate with. That kid may or may not bring his parents.
Exactly.
Right? And then they're not going to, the coupon's not going to feed everybody.
But so you can, and there's ways to track that, through your POS, through your point of sale system. There's ways to track that and say, okay, we had 50 coupons returned, and in the POS, those sales on those 50 coupons was X.
Mm-hmm.
They weren't all free.
Yeah.
So Joe, as a brand ambassador, last week or the last 2 weeks or the last month, was responsible for bringing in X amount of dollars into my store.
And so now
you do the same thing with your customer, with Whitey, with whoever.
Mm-hmm.
And you can put a dollar amount onto that brand ambassador by tracking those coupons.
And then the next question that people might be getting excited about as we're sitting here talking about it, I know I am, is how do you scale it? Well, right? You train that brand ambassador to make another brand ambassador.
Exactly.
Right? And then you give that, and then you maybe move that person up.
Right.
Right. So and then so the rest of the staff sees like, what the hell is going on?
So then they become your frontline employee / brand ambassador. So I think Chick-fil-A is really good at some, at combination roles.
Mm-hmm.
Chick-fil-A has director of talents in their store. Every store has a director of talent. That person's responsibility is finding people to work at Chick-fil-A. And they have training directors at Chick-fil-A. They have this and that. So you have a director of brand ambassadorship or something like that.
Mm-hmm.
And this is your role. And these are the guidelines that came down from corporate, because corporate recognized the importance of having local brand ambassadors and not controlling the message so heavy that we're just meh.
Yeah. But what you might find as well, and you tell me how much experience you've had in this, because what I'm finding out in this new brand is that corporate is actually starting to copy more of what the franchisee is doing, because they see the franchisee is having success with X initiative. Did you experience that all during your time? And maybe not with Subway, but also with some of your hotel hospitality stuff.
Yeah, to a certain point. And I think that's really important that people at the corporate level look at that. That, I always used to say that my managers should know their store better than I do.
Mm-hmm.
And the employee should know the store better than the manager.
Mm.
If I know that store better than the manager, either I didn't do well training or hiring, or I'm spending way too much time in that store.
Yeah.
So
remind me to come back to that.
Yeah, the franchisee should know the stores far better than corporate knows them. Just as a given. They should know their stores, they should know their markets far better than corporate does. So whether you have, and not just as figureheads, whether you have a franchisee ad council, and not just as, hey, look at us, we're cool, we've got a franchisee ad council, but we never listen to anything they say.
Right.
You truly, truly have to listen to what that ad council says. And I think you have to bring it really local.
Ad as an advertisement?
Yeah.
Okay.
But I think you have to bring it really local, the saying, all politics is local. All business is local. My wife's father, who first generation immigrant, would only shop in the neighborhood he lived in. And I mean, he was pretty successful. He started his own wood carving company, started a credit union. He was a successful man. He said, David, he told my wife this all the time, is we keep the dollars local.
How much of the meh brands do you think isn't also just on the corporate side, but the franchisee side? Because I think because the point that I wanted to circle back on that you had touched on there, David, is I think there's a little bit too much of absentee ownership happening. I understand you don't want to buy a job,
No.
but I also understand if you're so hands off, well, then that's not really being a business owner. I think that's more, what would you say, gambling with expensive hope?
Sure. But I think that you can be, to use your word, absentee owner. So generally, an absentee owner is someone who has hundreds of franchises. But you can, you can own 100 franchises, 200 franchises, 500 franchises, and be the CEO and the COO and never have an opportunity to visit every single one of those franchises.
Mm-hmm.
But if you foster that local mentality in your leadership, in your regional DMs, you still have that success of being a local store.
Mm-hmm.
Does that make sense? But I think it's the ones that.
But I really also, I understand, and part of me, when I first became a DM, I sort of got away, not sort of, totally got away from the sandwich making side of it. As I matured in that role, I thought to myself, I don't need to be in here every day. I don't need to be on the line every day, but I think it does have there's great merit to being on the line every now and then, because you don't look like you don't have that corporate higher up stigma with the rest of the franchisees and sandwich artists there. If, oh my God, Hunter can whip out a sandwich just as fast as we can. So is there any merit to that?
There is some, but it's also, I would say,
better question. Do you think that may or may not be some of the contributing factor to the brands that are stuck in meh, is because we don't have enough higher ups coming down and leading from the front?
Not necessarily.
Okay.
And the reason being is I pay someone to be a senior district manager and they're making sandwiches all the time. That's the highest paid sandwich maker in my organization in the country.
Oh, I didn't say making them all the time.
Right. But the same way is the president of the company, is his role to be, did I hire him? Did I hire a chief operating officer for the role of being in the stores?
No. But who's in the stores? Your brand ambassadors.
Right.
Right. So if Scott Boatwright comes down and can show a crew member that he can make a burrito bowl just as good as anybody else at Chipotle, it's like, whoa, that's Scott Boatwright. He's not just a suit. Right?
Yes and no.
Not all the time.
Yeah. But I also say that, I could make a great sandwich.
Mm-hmm.
When I first started, I could make a phenomenal sandwich.
Mm-hmm.
The more I progressed, the more stores we got. Mm-hmm. My thought shifted in that the manager and the employee better be able to make a better sandwich than I can.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I'm stuck on that because if you look at the past if you look at the current CEO of Starbucks now, Brian Nickel, when he got appointed, the Starbucks stock went immediately. He's not in the stores, whereas his predecessor put on a green barista apron and got right in there and started making them with him, and he was not successful. So it's
but I'm going to visit.
I can make an argument for both sides.
I'm going to visit stores.
Yeah.
I'm going to compliment employees that are making great sandwiches.
Mm-hmm.
I'm going to be a brand ambassador for that store or for all my stores.
Yeah.
I'm going to, love on the customers that come into that store.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
So I guess is the better question, how much or what involvement, if any, does a CEO or a higher up need to have at the store level with the front line and brand ambassadors to get them out of meh, or if they're teetering towards it?
They know that I care about them. Even if I'm not in the store, I care about that employee.
Mm-hmm.
I care about that manager. I care about that district manager, senior district manager, regional manager. They know that I care about them.
Mm-hmm.
That gets rid of the meh.
What does that look like? Especially from a higher up.
It has to be genuine. It can't just be words.
And it can't just be money either, I think.
No, and it's not just money, but it's like, I guess it's the trickle down thing, how I treat the person that's directly underneath me.
Mm-hmm.
You know,
Mm-hmm.
it's like, this is our company policy for PTOs and times off and whatever.
Mm-hmm.
I understand your situation is really unique. PTO says you can take 2 days for this. Take 3.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Do you think that you have to go down one more level?
Sure.
Because you might get into an echo chamber of affirmations with your direct reports telling you everything that you want to hear.
Yeah.
But then if you go down one level beneath, so let's just use if I was talking to my district managers and they're telling me everything I want to hear, like, awesome, our culture's fine. But then I go to the manager, one level below them, and they're telling me a different story. It's okay.
But it's, yeah.
Maybe we're teetering towards meh, and I'm getting a different story. I don't even know it.
No, yeah. Go down another level.
Mm-hmm. And then how do you equate that to care? How do you quantify care?
Good question.
How do you quantify care?
I don't know if you can quantify care.
Mm-hmm. I think
and now we're getting into so much stuff. We're getting into culture. We're getting into,
Well, that's what's getting them in meh.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Culture.
That's what happens. That's how IHOP starts pushing out a burger.
Right. So to bring it all back around about how do you get out of meh? Change your culture if it sucks.
Cool. Brand ambassadorship we talked about.
Brand ambassadorship.
Mm-hmm.
Both at the corporate or both at the management and the customer level.
Mm-hmm.
Pull back if you're at the corporate level. Pull back on, we need to control all advertising. We need to control all PR.
Mm-hmm.
Set some guidelines for it, but let the store and the franchisee have a develop that.
Yeah. Yeah, and you know who was a great example of that? I'm not sure how accurate it is because I'm not sure how much Hollywood twisted the truth. But if you watch The Founder, that's exactly what was happening.
Right.
That's how, Ray Kroc was doing some things here, and then the McDonald's brothers was like, what the hell are you doing? This isn't us. This is what... Yeah, but we're growing.
Right.
Right?
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Great movie.
Yeah.
Great movie.
If you haven't watched that might, if you're in, that'll clear up a lot of what I was just alluding to there in terms of what David was talking about, and just letting the franchisees kind of do their thing.
So it was franchisee, I believe. It was a franchisee that invented the Big Mac and brought it to corporate. Corporate embraced it.
Yeah.
Look at the seller on that.
Yeah.
And I think there were a couple other products that were developed at the franchisee level, at the store level, and brought to corporate, and corporate embraced them and ran with it.
Yeah.
Because that franchisee, that local owner, that local manager knew their store and their market.
Yeah, so run a test.
Right.
Just do a test. Okay, so what, you tell me that you're thinking a Shamrock Shake is gonna be a hit just because it's St. Patrick's Day, it's March. Oh, now look at every March they got Shamrock Shakes.
Right.
I'm not sure if that's how it went down, but
so we've talked a little bit about meh restaurants.
Yeah.
So when I was growing up, McDonald's was the place to go. I think they've kind of slid into meh a little bit. They get out of that with the Shamrock, with the McRib.
Yeah.
Then they're not meh anymore.
But also, if you walk into a McDonald's these days, The aesthetic is way different than it used to
and
be.
the service is way different.
Yeah.
It's not, I mean, they've, what's your number, and take a table tent and they bring it to you. They're kind of getting out of that
full service feel.
A little bit of full service.
It's not fast food, it's food served fast.
Right. Taco Bell is nowhere near meh.
Nowhere.
There is no ambivalence when it comes to Taco Bell.
They're sort of a maverick in terms of, because we were talking about just cutting the crap, but that's kind of piggybacks on what I was talking about before, is delivering that full service feel. Their menu is huge. I'm not saying if you're in meh, I think that's part of the reason that some brands have gotten into meh, is because they're doing everything they can to raise AUVs and just getting totally away from what is it they actually were known for in the first place. But and that's part of the reason why I'm so grateful for where I'm at right now, because as I was talking to you about, and as I wrote about on one of my Substack articles, is the change happens at the store level.
Yeah.
It happens at the store level. And if you can have those brand ambassadors who can tell a story like that kid I was talking to, and just it's like, hey, this is a real job. You're good with numbers. Well, I got news for you. Numbers are kind of big when it comes to QSR, right? So
yeah, when you look at the 30-30-30 rule, it's
what is 30-30-30? For anybody who might not know?
30% food costs, 30% labor, 30% fixed.
What is fixed cost?
Rent, utilities, royalties, all the other stuff.
So if you sit down with a kid who really likes numbers, explain that to him, you might get bought in a hurry.
He'll buy in.
Yeah.
He'll buy in.
Yeah.
He'll buy in. He will control waste. He'll be your waste guru.
Yeah.
He'll be your
So for a brand like Taco Bell, we don't even factor in food cost. It's not a problem.
You focus on waste, don't you?
Yes. Yeah. Yes. It's got to be less than 1% a day. Even per shift. Because food cost just isn't an issue.
Right.
Right? So, recap. Brand ambassador at the well, and then here's the other thing that we haven't touched on. You mentioned food cost, and it is exorbitant these days. I think. Tell me what you think about this. Sounded very Jordan Peterson there. Didn't mean to. It's so obvious, the brands that are stuck in meh, that they're just passing off the high food cost to the customer.
Sure.
By raising their prices.
Sure. Right.
Why is that dumb? Other than it being so obvious to the customer what they're doing.
Oh yeah, it's obvious to the customer. It's, I used to be able to walk into X and get a meal for $7. QSR industry is all about, there's a big focus on price point in the QSR industry, and now a year later, I walk into there, or post-COVID, I walk into there, and that same thing is costing me $16.
Yeah.
I'm not going to do it anymore. I'm going to do it less frequently. For $16, for an extra $4 or $5, I can go have a sit down meal with a waiter and a waitress.
Yeah.
Order off a menu.
How do you, is there a way to stop that? Is there a way around that?
So it's through, bulk purchasing, and, that's a corporate kind of thing, is controlling the cost of the product and the purchasing costs. The other thing is like Taco Bell does so effectively, is, controlling the waste.
Yeah.
Focus on the waste first. And the food, what was Franklin saying? Focus on your pennies, the dollars take care of themselves. If you focus on the waste, food cost will take care of itself.
Yeah. So but that's also dichotomous, wouldn't you think? I'm trying to poke holes, and I'm just trying to have some good banter back and forth here, because we also don't want to be penny wise and dollar foolish, right?
Correct.
So how do you negotiate that?
I think in the QSR industry, you need to have a balance of price points. I think that McDonald's was very successful, one of the first in the industry that brought this out, and other QSRs adopted it, is having that dollar menu, that $2 menu, that $5 price point. So you have to have both.
Yeah.
You know, but if I go in and I want a loaded sandwich with everything on it, and that's what I want, I'm willing to pay that higher price. But I like the focus of having maybe 3 different price points.
Good, better, best.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yes. Yeah. We have that right now with our deluxe boxes, a $5, a $7, and a $9 deluxe box. Yeah.
So I like, I think that's successful. But you can't do that at the expense of your core product. And I think a Ruby Tuesdays is a prime example of that, is that they had a menu that was 20 pages long and they kept introducing all sorts of different stuff. And it's like, who are you? What are you? You know, same thing with, what's the other one?
But there's a brand,
Applebee's, a little bit like that.
There's also another brand that does that very well, but they're kind of teetering on full service. I was going to try and play devil's advocate. I don't think now I've gone too far to go back. Cheesecake Factory. They don't do cheesecake, just cheesecakes.
No.
I mean, their menu's huge. Have you ever been to one?
I've never been.
Okay. Yeah, you said 20-page menu.
But we're, that, like you said, that's more full service than it is QSR. But if I want a Subway sandwich.
It's very distinct. You know what a sub from Subway tastes like.
Yeah, but
it isn't one from Jimmy John's. It's too different.
Right. If I want a sandwich, I need to be the go-to place for a submarine sandwich. If I want Tex-Mex, Taco Bell needs to be the go-to place in the QSR industry. If I want a burger, who's the go-to place for a quick, moderately good price burger? I don't think we can compare Five Guys to McDonald's. They're both burger places, but I want to get a bag of burgers to bring to the boys' baseball game.
Yeah. McDonald's.
Right.
So okay, now we're going somewhere else now. Maybe this is a piece of it. How much of it is marketing in terms of, and so marketing, because what McDonald's does, okay, now we're going places. So McDonald's is a brand, and a brand is something that you can identify something with, where marketing is simply telling the consumer what it is that you do. So if that's the case, and if we're looking to be clearer on our messaging and also following through with what our messaging says that we do, then why is Burger King failing? Because Burger King, it tells them in their name, we do burgers. Obviously, the name's Burger King. You don't know that about McDonald's but that's the difference is between a brand and marketing. Right. And so some of us are getting way too much. We're trying to be a brand when we really ought to be focusing more on the marketing piece. So why is IHOP pushing a burger when maybe they ought to be marketing more towards what it is that's actually in their freaking name?
Right.
Pancakes.
Yeah.
Right. Taco Bell. Right. So does that jibe at all?
Yeah, it does a little bit. Burger King was really successful with their "We Are Number 2" campaign. I don't know if you remember that. It was irreverent. It was, it kept taking. I mean, that was probably one of the most successful, in my opinion, Burger King campaigns. Was they embraced their number 2 spot and were successful at it.
Yeah,
and they could be the little guy going up against the Goliath.
Yeah.
And, throw the stones. And that was fun. And
that's so for anybody who doesn't know, I'm actually a certified copywriter. That's perfect because in your marketing, it doesn't have to be in every single marketing collateral that you put out there, but identifying a villain is good.
It's right.
So any drain clogs commercials you see, what do? They always identify the clogs as these little minions, right? It's a villain that we're taking our stones up against to throw rocks at, right? So I think that's, if I had to guess, that might be part of the reason why that worked. They made McDonald's the bad guy, right?
You know, they had the Burger King and the Ronald McDonald wrestling, and you know, that was so successful, you know, and they got away from it a little bit.
But you know what? You know what the certification that I got my copywriting license is called? Story brand.
Oh,
telling stories. And that's what we talked about with the brand ambassadorship.
I mean, and brand ambassadorship. So I'm you know, going to speak on experience here. We've had, back in the day, you know, we had someone come in, a high school kid come in to the store, and he loved Subway. His prom date loved Subway. And so he was going to bring her to Subway for dinner for their prom. And he brought in linen, crystal glasses, real serviceware. We set up the table. You know, that is a brand ambassadorship story. Another brand ambassadorship story. We had a wedding at one of our stores. They met at the store. Customers in line or customers in the dining room, and they got, you know, they were both regulars, got to talking. They ended up having their wedding ceremony in the store.
I mean,
that's a brand ambassadorship.
I mean, that's a story.
You know, like you said, story. And who brings those stories to the forefront? Your brand ambassador.
Right. And that's one thing that I've been saying in my new home now is, whenever I hear bitching and moaning going on because of lack of we're short staffed, or we're this, that, and the other thing, and I always say I'll tell the kids, but we're going to have one hell of a story to tell, aren't we? Remember this day on this time, and we just got slammed, and we only had 4 people on the line. We should have had 7, and then we were just scrambling to do that. And that's a story. Right? And so if you can have somebody like that, I'm not saying that's me, but if you can have somebody like that, just always perceptually, or shifting the narrative, which is another word for story, shifting the narrative, shifting the perception, to even make the bad times good.
But then you have to have someone to share it with a greater audience. Like you said, like you just exampled, hey, this store just got 2 busloads of college volleyball players. Unexpected. And there were only 2 of us working, or 3 of us working. And, you know, it took us forever, but we jammed through it. You know, I was out there, you know, we whatever, you know, your cheapest little snack is a cookie or whatever. You know, I just set a tray of these out in the dining room, said, ladies, help yourself. We'll get to you soon. Then your brand ambassador shares that story. Even though it's kind of negative. They share that story in a positive way.
There's nothing wrong with the negative. You know why? Because that's how every story starts, is with a problem. Without a problem, double negative. Without a problem, there is no story. And I talk about it in this book. I think, and I don't think I hypothesize that's why Marvel's Avengers trounced Justice League at the box office, because Justice League had to be remade. Because they did not introduce the villain, like we just talked about, until half an hour into the first make of it. The opening scene of Avengers, Thanos, who everybody knows, was wreaking havoc. They introduced him in the opening scene, and they took it a step further. They made the villain the main character of that story.
I'm gonna break the third wall here and talk directly to the audience.
Please.
Where else on a podcast talking about QSR are you going to get people talking about Marvel movies?
Nowhere else.
Zoom.
But I can't help it. It's because I mean, as a writer, as an author, it's a shift is a story. You got 10 hours.
How many
people are you going to interact with? How many things are going to go wrong? you've got stories all around you. And if you just paid attention a little bit, but to your point there, identifying that person who can identify what a story looks like.
And share it.
Yes.
Immediately.
Yes.
I mean, we are a quick consumption, people.
Yep.
That's why we're in the QSR industry. Quick consumption. So you got to share those stories immediately. That's why you have an identified brand ambassador in your store who immediately can post that to social media pages.
Yep. Brand ambassador. Would you say, is it feasible, if we're doing a recap, to inject full service feel into quick service?
Sure.
Okay. And was there a third point that we touched on today?
So corporate
letting go.
Letting go and bringing PR local.
Yeah.
Bringing the PR local instead of national. It's great that this brand sponsors NASCAR. How does that affect me in Alaska?
Yeah.
How does that affect me in Arizona that my brand sponsors NASCAR?
Yeah. It's great that Josh Allen, quarterback for the Buffalo Bills, loves footlong sidekicks. How does that affect us in Jenison, Michigan?
Exactly. So I'm not a huge fan of celebrity spokesmen. I've never been a huge fan of celebrity spokespeople.
They're bought and sold.
Right. This football player for the Green Bay Packers.
Yeah.
In Michigan ain't going to go over too well.
Right.
So I'm not a huge fan of those because I think there can be negative connotations attached. And so that's why I like, the local person talking about it, or this is Hunter Charneski, who's a franchisee in Michigan, and he's going to talk about why this sandwich is phenomenal.
Yeah. Well, I mean, we keep going around and around about it, and I think leaning on David's experience and just how much we've talked in depth about it, I think if you're going to take away one thing from today's show, it's to identify those brand ambassadors both in and out of your restaurant locally, and I think that's how you get out of meh or start steering the hell away from it if you feel yourself drifting toward it.
Exactly. Yeah.
Anything else?
Make your franchise feel local.
Right. So with that, that's episode 2. We're on LinkedIn. We're on social. Share it. Share with your friends. Right. Be a PR brand ambassador.
PR brand ambassador.
Yeah. All right. Thanks, everybody.
Thank you.